Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparuta de sangamata satavara ye sodavanta bamunjantu satang. So this afternoon is this occasion to reflect on Dhamma, and Dhamma is apparent here and now, timeless. So it's ehipassiko to come and see for yourself. So it's something to be recognized that we don't, the ignorant, unenlightened human being doesn't recognize. Because it's apparent here and now, when we think about it, we try to say, what is apparent here and now? We're looking for something. Is it the temple? Is it the Sangha? We're looking for something. Notice that tendency to be looking for something, trying to get something. Like the sound of silence, for example, trying to get the sound of silence is because I call it a sound, which really is not a sound. It's something you've got to find and get, not something you are here and now. So it's trying to find yourself. And I remember one time looking for my glasses all over the kuti, couldn't find them. Then I realized they were on my nose. Because I wasn't being mindful here and now. A sound has a beginning and an ending. So we say do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. We have words for sounds of different levels, of high, low, medium sound. Sounds are what we hear through the ears. So our whole structure of conditioning is based on that assumption that I've got to hear something with my ears. And I keep trying to point that out, that's not apparent here and now. Timeless. And it's akalika Dhamma, timeless. So it's not about a temple, a Buddhist temple, or a venue, or a place, or a thing, or a company of people, or whatever. It's wherever you are, it's always here and now, whether you're alone in your kuti or in the middle of a meeting. So the silence is behind the sound. So when you're looking or assuming, just using the word, looking for a sound, or trying to find a sound, that's you as a separate person trying to find something that you think would be good way to practice. So you notice that, really investigate it. Are you somebody who's got to get something? And if, it's not that you shouldn't, but when I want to get something, I can be aware of that, me wanting to get something I don't have here and now. I listen to my ego. Me, Ajahn Sumedho, wanting to get something is like this. It's a form of desire. And as long as I operate from me, Ajahn Sumedho, then I can fool myself, because the ego is very good at proliferating all over the place and justifying all kinds of silly things. But what's beyond the ego before you think? And then this is what Sati Sampajanya is about, where you actually investigate. Here and now is like this. And as long as you're operating from trying to understand it intellectually and get it, because I talk about it, then of course you're always operating from the ego. Ajahn Sumedho recommends sound of silence. I want to practice like him. And that's ego. That's, it might be virtuous or good, but it's still a creation, seeing yourself as separate from me, as somebody who's got to get something I recommend. And I encourage you to let go of all that, because it's the very obstruction to stream entry or sotapanna. As long as you see yourself as a separate person, in any form, conventionally it's okay, but we're not pointing to the conventions any more than they are impermanent and not self. Conventional reality is, very nature is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not personal. So when I say that, when we talk about the Pali word anatta, not self, it's not about denying anything, it's just pointing to the reality of consciousness here and now, awareness here and now is like this. To me it seems so simple. But I've gone through all the doubts over many years. Because egotistically, I keep, I'm a doubter. I tend to, am I a stream enterer yet? I've been a monk nearly 60 years. Is this the path? Is the sound of silence the path? So you want to get, tell me what the path is, teacher, and I will try to walk on that same path. That's all the usual proliferating tendencies of the ego. So it's very important to know your ego. You're not getting rid of it. It's not about destroying your ego, but understanding that it's very conditioned and deluding. As long as you operate from the ego, I am a person trying to get something I don't have, you'll spend the rest of your life looking for silence or the path, as long as that basic delusion of a separate self is your motivation, is your operation agenda, your modus operandi. So don't be afraid of your ego. It's not judgmental. You're not trying to judge it. Like the silent consciousness behind the ego is not judgmental. It's your ego that judges. It's your sense of a separate self that passes judgment on the world around you, on the people you live with, on your own tendencies, habits, character tendencies, and so forth. It's based on the ego about good or bad, right or wrong, true or false. That's ego. When they say, I'm a good person, that on a conventional level, that's or I've made mistakes in my life. I've done some rather dreadful things in my life. That's ego operating. Because your true nature, which is Dhamma, pure consciousness, awareness, isn't about good and bad anymore. It's where right and wrong and good and bad and virtue and vice cease. It's a cessation, it's nirodha, it's nibbana. So it's very important to, passing judgment on yourself, whether you're a good meditator or a bad meditator, or you made some terrible mistakes in your life and you're destined for a lower rebirth in a lower realm. We can go on endlessly imagining all kinds of possibilities about previous lives, about when I die, what level of rebirth will I have. All of that is conceptual proliferation. Previous life, past life, future life. So Buddhists talk like that. They can easily talk about past lives or have views about their past lives and their future, because it's part of a conventional form of Buddhism. But the Buddha, in his basic teaching, is pointing at direct understanding of Dhamma as your true nature, which is not about past lives or future existence. And that's why I always emphasize the value of that first sermon, the Four Noble Truths, because it's all there in those four simple statements. Suffering, its causes, and the end of suffering. And the end of suffering means we don't create suffering. We still endure the karmic result of having a body till it passes away, till it dies. So we can torture ourselves. We go to psychotherapists, psychiatrists, go through all kinds of ways of trying to deal with what I believe I am and my unhappiness, my depression, my fears, my anxieties, my everything that we tend to create with thinking. Now, learning to abide in the silence, you give up thinking, because thinking ceases in the silence. And so what I refer to as sound of silence is where you're not thinking, but you're still conscious, here and now. So it's learning to integrate that silence into daily activities. Like in Thai monasteries, putting on your robe can be an exercise in silence. Or just a habit of putting on the robe the way you're told to do it. I've got to put my robe on like this, and on, like we can identify with it, or just be thinking about where we're going once we are robed. And so just putting on a summoner's robe can be just, totally done out of ignorance and habit. But one can also do it in the silence of here and now. With eating food. And the whole kind of Thai forest core what structure is about having that, being silent while we're in the silence, mindful of the eating from the alms bowl, putting on the robe, washing the alms bowl after, putting it in a safe place. All that, is that just empty kind of rules and precepts that they make up that you have to conform to as a person? We can see it like that. We think we have to conform to the way they do it at Wat Pah Pong, and not that that's bad, anything wrong with it, but it's still operating from the sense of I've got to conform to these rules, these precepts, this tradition as a person, where the actual tradition is based on silence. Learning to just break through the habits of just putting on your clothes heedlessly, or just eating without any awareness, just chewing up food. And all the functions of the body can be a form of awareness. It's like this, not judging it. Like just the excretory functions of the body can be seen, like we can see it as, we don't like to mention it or talk about it. We don't, it's not polite conversation at a dinner party. But in terms of reflection, it's being aware. It's like this. Having human bodies like this. And you notice these words, it's like this, is not judgmental. It's not about, are you doing everything properly according to the precepts, or how can I do it better, or endlessly proliferating, or just trying to ignore the unpleasantness of certain functions. So the point of the Vinaya, the monastic Vinaya, is not to just bind you to rules and precepts so everybody obeys the same rules and conforms to all the Vinaya rules out of a sense of obeying, obedience, loyalty to the tradition, on and on like that. We can justify it about good Vinaya or not good Vinaya. Or is Vinaya much more practical than that? Is it more useful than just conforming to a lot of precepts? So it's up to you to really figure it out, to have the courage to awaken here and now and just be the watcher, the Buddho, knowing Dhamma is like this. Silent. Dhamma is silence. And you have to keep reminding yourself, because the personal conditioning is so strong. You know, we don't have a choice when we're born. We get what our parents tell us. We get the conventions of our parents, of our class, of our generation. You know, we didn't choose it. It's just what we get when we're conditioned from the innocent early years of our existence. Some of it can be qualified as good, some of it not very good or very bad, but recognize it's not what you are. You're not a real person limited by your conditioning, as you might believe or been told or think or assume. So that's liberation, freedom from the slavery of samsara, the world of delusion. Samsara it means delusion. It's not reality. So we're actually living in a world of delusion. As you listen to the news and you hear how people, the kind of things that people are saying about each other or believing, you know, is it good or bad, right or wrong, or is it disgusts you or inspires you or whatever? You can be the witness to how the deluded world that you experience through the body and the senses, how it affects you. It's like this. And this is a way to transcend the taking sides on the political level, on religion, on race, on gender, on sexuality, on all these identities that we generate with our thinking mind. Now, this temple, I've always found it very silent. So I always like to meditate in this particular place. And when we decided to build the temple, the architect said, well, you know, came and asked me what I wanted. I told him that I wanted a place, a temple where as soon as stressed out Londoners entered the temple, they'd fall silent. Of course, I was joking, but in terms of my experience, that's actually what he's done. The conditions in the temple are not glamorous, like they don't draw your attention out to look at all the gold and shiny, bejeweled things that decorate the walls, the pillars. The architect wanted it to be kind of natural, like the pillars are oak, kind of very British oak trees as a forest tradition, and the bricks are all handmade in England. They're not manufactured. the idea of creating a space to meditate, to perform ceremonies, Sangha ceremonies, that is suitable for where the silence is the important thing, not the decoration. So when I was a Samanera, before I met Luang Por Cha, I think I've told you many times, I made up this koan. If everything, the Buddha said, all sankharas are impermanent, and I believed that. I was inspired by that. I thought that's a very wise teaching. Then I made up a conundrum. Maybe, is there anything that is permanent? And my intellect said, well, the Buddha said all sankhara are impermanent, and everything's a sankhara. My eyes, my ears, my nose, my tongue, my body, everything, the objects of my senses, what I see, hear, smell, taste, touch, what I think, they're sankharas. They are empty phenomena. And the Buddha said they are empty phenomena. Where the ego, how can you see your ego or your sense of self-importance as just empty phenomena? It's terribly important to understand who I really am as a person, my place in the universe, the purpose of my life. It's very important for me to understand who I really, really am. And then the Buddha said, when I realized that all that was empty phenomena, I started laughing, because most of my life before I realized this was based on the assumption of me as a separate person who has to get something or get rid of something. And so operating from that position in Buddhism, you can go to a Buddhist monastery and still operate totally from European conditioning. So you can say all sankharas are impermanent, and that's sape sankharani cha. You can chant it in Pali, and then I think the Buddha said that must be right. Who am I to question it? And then the invitation is to investigate. Are they really, all sankharas, impermanent? Not just believe because the Buddha said that, but the investigation of anicca, dukkha, anatta is to invite you to find out whether that's true or not. Not to congratulate you or persecute you if you don't believe it. So what is the word sankhara? It's a Pali word, so it's foreign to the English language. But English is a language that adopts all other languages into it quite easily. So we can say everything's a sankhara, or a phenomenon, or a condition, or a thing. So it's just another word for a thing, a condition, a phenomena. And so that's just trying to translate Pali words into English that we can comprehend. Because when we first hear the word sankhara, we don't know what it means. But languages are, in that way, that's their purpose, is to define, to label, to judge. So we have heaven and hell. Heaven is everything's wonderful, beautiful, happy, and everything we want is there, and we're secure and happy with loving people and a trustworthy society. That's heaven. And hell is its opposite. The worst possible forms of punishment, pain, and misery is hell. This is conceptual proliferation. It's just the thinking mind that we never question, that we tend to believe. Is there really a heaven or hell? Did Hitler, is he in hell right now? My generation were brought up during the Second World War. And so you thought Hitler should be burning in hell forever. And, we can assume that's what's happening to him. But the fact is that hell doesn't exist, except in our minds when we create hellish states of self-hatred, of revenge, aversion, anger. Jealousy is a form of hell. Pride is a form of hell, being proud of yourself because you're gifted or beautiful or talented or better than the rest. So that's fair enough. Heaven and hell are good enough words. They have them in Thai. What's heaven and what's hell in Thai and every other language. But apparent here and now, the silence is not heaven or hell. But it's like this. And when you rest in it, when you begin to really develop it, trust it, abide in it, it's your real home. It's a blissful place to be in a very foolish world and society that we experience through our forms. What happens when you die? Then that's a common question. Do you go somewhere? Do you have a soul that goes to some place? Or will I be reborn again? Or is it just oblivion, annihilation? Once you're dead, that's it, period. And then you believe, and you've got to pay for your sins that you've committed in this life, and you can imagine anything in terms of retribution and punishment or rewards for being virtuous, kind, and generous. I've been so generous and kind person in my life. I deserve a heavenly rebirth. But the fact is, in terms of here and now, I don't know. I don't know heaven or hell. I know the silence which is apparent here and now, timeless. That's a realization. It's reality itself. It's ultimate reality. It's not imagined or just a proliferating Buddhist concept. To be experienced by the wise, Bajitang Vaitidapo Inui, to be experienced through wisdom. And wisdom is sape sankarani cha, all conditions are impermanent. That gives you the clue to investigate. Try to find a sankhara that is permanent. So is silence a sankhara? And then, of course, you can think that it is, you can believe it is, because everything's sankhara. But silence, is it a thing that we create out of thoughts? Is it just, that I create? Or did God create silence? And we can go on endlessly doubting or trying to find out, is silence a creation, or is it apparent here and now, timeless, encouraging investigation? So that's the whole point of this winter's retreat, is the encouragement to investigate. How you experience life here at Amaravati during winter retreat is like this. Whether you feel positive or negative is not the point. If being negative is like this, being positive is like this. It's not about you should be grateful and appreciate the opportunity given to you to do this retreat, and you should be grateful, and I tell you how things you should feel. But whatever you feel, you're the Bhuto witnessing. It is like this. If it's ingratitude or resentment, it's like this. And that mood that arises, you can't sustain unless you keep thinking about it. Once you kind of are the Bhuto observing, watching the mood, its nature is to cease. And you experience cessation and silence. You realize it's not an experience, it's a reality. But you realize silence. You don't experience it because it's not an object that you experience, it's apparent here and now. It's not created, not a sankhara, not good or bad, right or wrong, virtuous or sinful. But it's your true nature. Everyone here, it's everyone's true nature, no matter how virtuous or sinful you might be. It's the important thing is to realize, to take a stand with Dhamma rather than with the conditioning of your culture, of your education, of your background. So as long as I'm alive, I'll keep pointing this out. Because it needs to be pointed out. You need to be encouraged to be brave and really look at what's apparent here and now, and if you just let go, it's not like you trying to find apparent here and now, but just relaxing. Conscious awareness here and now is like this, it's silent. So I offer this as a reflection for this afternoon.